Catherine Atkins has collaborated on various professional teams to build a long list of successful projects in South Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, and further afield. Catherine has completed various high-rise offices, hotels, retail, and mixed-use projects in the development hub of Sandton during her time at Co-Arc International. Her expertise in the delivery of complicated projects across the continent of Africa is unrivaled. Malika Walele is currently the resident site architect for the tallest building in Africa, the Leonardo, a position she has held since March 2017. She is responsible for on-site design and technical resolutions. As one of the few females on site, she has pioneered a space for women to display their skills in a male-dominated industry and work environment. Her deep passion for traveling has broadened her ability to reflect social consciousness in her designs and photography, which are reflected in her attitude towards architecture. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the DAS stage, Catherine Atkins and Malika Walele.
So the Leonardo is a highly innovative commercial model that was designed to be viable and complete at a variety of heights. The complex mix of building use, changing and developing whilst the tower was under construction required significant flexibility and robustness in its design. I'm Malika, and this is Catherine. I started my career with Co-Arc back in 2016 after having completed a master's degree. Catherine's a director at Co-Arc, and she has been working for the company for around 21 years. She's worked with Legacy on numerous projects since the early 2000s, and Legacy and Nedbank are clients for the Leonardo.
Cool. Hi, everyone. So from the onset in 2012, when the first phone call actually came through to our offices, we continued and into 2015. So I led the consultant team. I managed the design implementation on site and the technical coordination of the entire project. And due to my long-standing relationship with the Legacy Group, I became the main liaison between the clients, the professional team, and our in-sites or in-office design team. So, as Malika said, as they said, in 2017, Malika became our role on-site architect, and due to the complexity and the pure scale of the Leonardo, Co-Arc felt the importance of a permanent link between the office and the site. The project had a unique fast-track pace, and the design of the Leonardo was ongoing. There was a permanent requirement that we needed on site and a hands-on approach, and Malika became our ears and eyes on site. So a beautiful shot there of a hand sketch on the right-hand side, an A-Naught hand axonometric sketch that our lead designer did, and some interesting height transparent changes on the side. So the Leonardo is a complex mixed-use high-rise building and is the first major tower building to be constructed in South Africa in decades. The original brief was a 33-story tower. So the flexible and adaptive design evolved, which responded into changing market demands and strengthening the financial viability throughout the construction period. It developed into a 55-story tower. Its area, square meterage, is a total of 125,500 square meters. And until early last year, just 2019, at no point did we have a set brief. It was a constant moving target. And from the beginning, back in 2012, the intention was never to build the tallest building in Africa. So here's our front shop in. I'm not sure if many of you know him. Back in the day, we used to be Mayor Pienaar. So he was one of our senior partners for over 50 years. And he was the lead design architect of the Leonardo itself. And I like to call him the author of the building. A bit about his history. In 1967, when he was much younger, he obtained his Master of Architecture from the University of Pennsylvania in America. So Francois led our practice through the years to win numerous international awards throughout his career. And just last year, he actually retired from the practice. So he comes and visits us every now and then. So the relationship between Francois and Mr. Dorrestein, Bart Dorrestein of the Legacy Group, began back in the 1970s when Mayor Pienaar were appointed to design the Rao University. And back in those days, they developed and built the Rao University, and Bart was actually a foreman in his younger days. And they developed a very close relationship, even though Francois was the top connection and Bart was the bottom connection, and Francois gave Bart a hectic time on site as he was building and not building to his standards. So just some of our high-rise experience. This is back in 2015. We were approached from Perkins & Will, a firm of architects, to complete the Revit model and the working drawings for this Boulevard Heights Towers, which was for Emaar Properties. So it was built recently and completed in Dubai. Funny enough, it's double the two towers are double the size of the Leonardo at 250,000 square meters. Okay.
So in the 90s, Francois worked with Bart on Nelson Mandela Square. The urban design that he worked on involved linking the square to its surroundings. So links were created between the square and Sandton City, as well as surrounding business nodes. Part of the urban design was to pedestrianize Maud Street. This would then connect the square to Village Walk, which we now know as the Mark. The colonnade that Francois later designed at the Leonardo now emphasizes his original design scheme. So the Michelangelo Tower and the Raphael apartments both look onto the square and are both projects that Co-Arc and Legacy worked together on. So an aerial shot of Sandton, Sandton being the major business and financial district of Johannesburg. The Leonardo is located on Maud Street, and it's accessed by major arteries being the M1 Highway, Sandton Drive, Catherine and Greyston. And the building is accessed via Rivonia and West. It's surrounded by, as we mentioned, Mandela Square, Nedbank, Gautrain Sandton City and Convention Center, and other major businesses. I keep pressing the wrong button. Okay, so 8 years ago, back in 2012, Bart approached Nedbank, who were the owners of the site. He had an idea to develop a tower for a legal firm who was seeking new office spaces. He also, at that point, approached Francois to design the building. So the original building was a terraced, landscaped building. The facade was fully glazed, and it had a double skin, which was ventilated.
So this beautiful Noddy diagram, which we like to call it, it's quite clear in the center there. You can see Sandton Square and all the surrounding buildings, immediate surrounding buildings, and its close proximity to the actual Leonardo site at the moment. So the yellow at the top of the screen is actually the Nedbank CIB, their head office, and the yellow dots on the square is Legacy Group, the Michelangelo Tower, the Michelangelo Hotel, and the Da Vinci, all being important buildings within the district. So I'm not sure if we all like it, but sometimes, we all each have our own tastes. The architectural language of the Michelangelo Tower is quite strong. And then there's our Nedbank clients in the building that they currently occupy. So between the two languages of our clients and their existing buildings, you can actually see quite clearly the difference between the two. So as the design developed, the clients wanted the building to look like the one on the left, and we wanted our building to look like the one on the right. So you can see the vast difference in choice.
So as a result of this, the design changed from a fully glazed facade to a less transparent one, where we added a lot more solid elements, which slowly, very slowly, but surely met up with our clients' expectations and vision. So not only did the facade go through numerous reiterations, but so did the roof. Hand drawings have always been a really vital part of the design process at the company, and this always goes through straight to construction drawings. Alongside our hand drawings, we did 3D renders and a lot of modeling for the client, and we calculated that we compiled close to 40 versions of the building, which included differences in the height of the building. So the 9 options shown here are not the only options. After some time, the legal firm as a tenant didn't actually materialize. So Legacy at that point needed to explore alternative uses to attract the market. So together with Legacy, we explored the height and the possible uses of the building. And with every single option, we looked at a full bill of quantities needed to be done. In the interim of all of this, so not having finalized the brief, nor knowing what the uses of the building would be, or what the height of the building was going to be, we started construction. So some of our council submissions, just to give some background information, some of our council submissions.
Yeah, there wasn't just one.
So the first council submission was in 2015, which was the basement and the podium. So this excluded the tower portion. Phase 2 included the tower at 33 floors, and this was submitted in October 2016. So we had started construction November 2015, so a couple of months later. And then during this process, we then had to apply for rezoning to a 55-story building because the original rights was 40 floors, and we needed more bulk. Then the 43-floor building was approved in July 2018, and the 55-floor building, which is what the building is now, was approved not so long ago in January 2019. Between all of this, so between the many variations, the council submission, we also had a 42-floor building, a 43-floor building, a 47, a 48, and a 51-floor building. Every single option had to be investigated on a structural level, a servicing level, and from a financial approach. So the photo with Bart and a typical, very typical scenario of our client's high level of input, which has resulted in the various reiterations of the building. And then we calculated during this presentation, well, preparing for it, that we had close to about 350 design meetings between 2013 and 2019, many of which happened during construction. So you can just imagine how we felt.
one frustrating path, or shall I say journey, that we've had. So there's our site that we adopted in 2012. It's a relatively small site, only just under 6,000 square meters. It was excavated from a previous scheme that actually failed, sadly. So it was 4 levels deep, and the existing lateral supports was nearing its life stage of almost, I wouldn't say collapsing, but the piles were in fact moving. So we're glad we actually started to develop and prevented the hole from moving. Interestingly, geology across the sites, being such a small site, differed from one corner to the next, so that was a challenge on its own. And also we had quite a bit of ground seepage. So the previous development, that's what they left us. The yellow is all the structural footings that they had already cast into the excavated hole. So quite a challenge for us. I mean, the concrete had already deteriorated and like I said, was there for between 7 and 8 years. So we didn't want to excavate the costly excavation to remove everything or even use any of it. So during our excavation, you can actually see the sheer scale of the footings they left behind. I mean, that top cube there gives a bit of a perspective of what they left for us. So in 2015, November, we actually started on site and began some excavation, and there's some very important women there on the right-hand side. Yes. So when we began our grid, we decided to rather actually shift our entire grid on the site to try and avoid as many of the existing footings that we could as possible. So you can see the red, and the grid is our grid. And some interesting scaled columns and footings on the right-hand side. In the lower picture, you can see the sheer scale of one of our footings. And because of the, like I mentioned, the geology changing from one corner to the next, one footing was supposed to be 5 meters cubed, ended up being 7 or 8 meters cubed, or even 10 meters deep. It depended on what soil conditions we found. So the previous scheme, you can see on that larger yellow block, they ran the main core of it was also a tower. They ran their core in a northwest direction, which meant that they were quite environmentally inefficient because they would have faced west and east, which is not great. So our core with the red block, we had to, we couldn't avoid everything, but we did have to straddle over the existing mass concrete. And then in terms of the site, you can actually see the width of the tower in its narrowness of the actual site. So a lot of people have asked us, what are those 5 walls on the roof, and is the building actually finished? Yeah. So the 5 spine walls are the lateral walls from the ground all the way up through into the roof, and have become an architectural feature for us, expressing the structure of the core. And the core itself is, or the tower itself is actually on its limit in terms of the width of a tower. So one of Francois' beautiful 1 in 50 sketches, that was drawing on an A1 piece of bump, which he probably developed in half a day. Yeah, he was magnificent in his, well, he is magnificent in his drawing. So with Malika saying that the roof went through so many reiterations, I think construction was nearly complete at the top when we decided, oh, we'll do this. So the roof became also the viewing deck, which was a late change. And what we did is then we suspended it from the spine walls via hangers and that then also created shading for the Leonardo suite below.
So, the accessible portion of the viewing deck is actually set back from the edge of the slab, and this prevents people from looking down, which would look straight onto the Leonardo suite below, and it also prevents sound traveling down to the Leonardo suite. So the viewing deck eventually evolved high-end bar, no pun intended. The Leonardo suite itself is 3,000 square meters. It takes up 3 floors at the top of the building. It has a double-story glass viewing box. It has 4 open terraces, a swimming pool, an entertainment deck, and an internal lift. So if anyone is interested, it is still available. It goes for about 250 million rand.
We can earn some commission.
And I think another thing to note is that the spine walls being exposed at the top of the building, the facade of the building is quite monotonous in a sense, and one of the co-arc things is to really expose materials and structure, and I think that although people may not understand it, that does it quite well. So on a good day, you can see as far as the Voortrekker Monument. You can also see the Magalies Range, and you can see the Joburg CBD. But I think even on days when you're surrounded in clouds just like this, it's pretty spectacular. So at the point we completed our spine walls and our last ever slab pour, which I was very and the erection of our spire, which is the highest point of the building, was quite a momentous occasion for the entire team, professionals and contractors. So coming back down to ground, one of the main structural, sorry, I keep looking down. One of the main structural and architectural elements in the building are our gorgeous 11-meter high keel columns. They're at the base of the tower, and they open up onto the main public pool deck at the top of the podium. So the northern facade of the tower is offset from the basement and the podium structural grid, column grid. So this ended up dictating the architecture at the junction. The result was a synergy between architecture and engineering. So the keel columns transfer the load of the northern facade down into the footings. Francois' intention was to create a triple volume space which would end up housing a public restaurant. I think people are always aware of being in a tower building when they're in this space just by the sheer magnitude, proportions, and scale of the space and the columns.
I'm going to take the mic from you. So during the process, pretty much halfway the structural framework was up. The Trinity session, I'm not sure if some of you have heard of them. It's a group of artists, and they source local art from local artists in South Africa. They were contracted to do the art in the building, and the concept was earth, wind, and fire, and works through all the public spaces throughout the building. So in the keyhole columns that Malika was mentioning, you can't quite understand the scale, but you'll understand the scale just now, is these mesh, this aluminium fine mesh, which was actually plated, anodized, just adds an element of what is depicted as wind moving through the spaces. So the result is a play of light, texture, and color within the space.
So the end result of the space, it's a restaurant called Autumn. It's made up of private dining space, which was also a later addition, which actually takes up a portion of what was our triple volume space. a wine cellar, a beautiful open kitchen, and there's a creche tucked towards the back. So the public spaces are open if anybody's interested in seeing them. So the restaurant's open as well as our reception areas. So the restaurant opens up onto our main pool deck, houses the gym, the spa, and also another later addition, the Octo Bar, which has a sunset terrace.
So one of the very recent pictures taken from the Michelangelo Tower. I'm sure many of you, well, those that have seen the tower, I'm not sure if the Pretoria guys actually come to Joburg, or I would hope you've come to Joburg. Or you can see it from Pretoria, true. So throughout the tower itself, so we call it the basement, the podium, and the tower. The tower itself has 4 interstitial spaces. There's one actually at the lower end that sits on the podium, and then there's 3 there. So those are our actual service plant rooms on the southern side, and on the northern side it's duplex apartments. So there's 4 within the tower, and on the roof you could have possibly seen that for the Leonardo suite we've got 2 smaller plant rooms on the east and west that only actually feed the Leonardo suite. So as you can, those keyhole columns that you can see on the left that Malika was talking about, they actually form part of the structure, an important factor of the structure. And then on the southern side, at every interstitial space, we have our sheer concrete walls that are also taking the load of the northern and the southern columns back to the core at those levels. So the picture on the right is the actual service plant room. And then on the left-hand side, at the top left there, in the duplex apartments, that entire 4-meter wall comes back to the plant room. To the core. So an interesting fact that our client made us change was the actual tower footprint only has 4 internal columns, 2 on the east and 2 on the west. The rest of the floor plate, which you'll see soon, has no other columns. All the columns are on the facade. So in terms of if ever there was a catastrophic failure, the shear walls on those interstitial spaces are actually hanging the structure. So there won't be an ultimate collapse. Another fact, interesting fact, is the tower itself, all the way from the ground all the way up, the tower portion was cast using 70 MPa concrete, and the rest of the podium and the basement was just 30 MPa concrete. So from a mechanical point of view, each of those interstitial spaces serves up and down, depending on the service, to around about 5 floors up and 5 floors down. So on the facade is yet again another perforated aluminium facade, allowing air movement. So we've got our air handling units, which cool our refrigerants, which the refrigerant is then reticulated throughout the tower and reticulates to VRV units, which are in all the apartments and office spaces. So we've got heat in the middle picture at the bottom, the heat recovery units. So we recover the heat generated from the air handling units, and then we use that, and in turn large heat pumps for generation of hot water. So not just the air conditioning side of things, from a mechanical side, we need to extract every single bathroom. All that air needs to get thrown out the building. We need to bring fresh air in, and this happens at every interstitial space. We bring fresh air in, and it's ducted to all the VRV units as fresh air supply. And then we also bring fan the air back into our fire escape staircases to pressurize the staircases, and we pressurized our lift shafts. So that bottom left there, you can actually see in our basement, sorry, I'll just go back. The basement's B4 level, we house all our large domestic water tanks and our fire sprinkler tanks. Obviously, due to the sheer weight and mass, we couldn't support it elsewhere in the tower. So on each interstitial space, we pump up water to smaller water tanks, domestic water tanks, cold water. They then in turn fill up the hot water cylinders. And yeah, a very busy and complicated space to coordinate. So that's typical floor plate of the tower, actually one of the apartment layouts. And again, you can see only on the east and west with those 2 internal columns, 4 internal columns that I spoke about. And then we've got the passage running on the eastern, north and south. So the blue is highlighting the wet services, hot water, cold water, and drainage. And then the yellow is our electrical and data, and green is mechanical. I don't know if you can understand, at the bottom of the lift shaft, we actually had 4 main riser ducts that were split into different services. So the red being our firefighting equipment. And then the orange is our refuse room that takes place. It's an air-conditioned refuse room on each level. So as a tenant or an owner, you would take your refuse into that room. And at night, the refuse guys then take out the refuse, take it down the goods lifts or fire lifts and down into the level 1 refuse room. So, you know, to service this monster of a building takes time.
I think what's also interesting to note is that with every single floor plate, they differed from a design perspective, the internal spaces, which then meant that on a service level, every single floor differed as well.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we would have 12 apartments on one level. At most, I think we've got 6 or 7. You know, sometimes we had wealthy clients that could afford a much bigger apartment. There's actually one apartment that almost takes half the floor plate. It's quite a magnificent apartment. So in terms of the fire, we've also got the fire tanks in the basement. It's a 3-story tank for the entire building that is sprinkled. So we've got 2 diesel tanks and 2 electrical tanks, pumps, sorry. 2 diesel pumps and 2 electrical pumps that then pump the water up and circulate through the tower. The middle bottom image is actually the Jenny room. It's quite well, for us we think it's a beautiful pic. They're two 2,000 kVA Jennies, and we can run the building for almost 12 hours with the current load of diesel that's on site. If it reaches empty state, we can refill it, obviously, and we keep running.
So that's the entire building?
Yeah, so that it runs the entire building, excluding air conditioning. I'll tell you a bit more about the electrical just now. Oh, sorry, going back there. So when the restaurants and the chef moved into the building, who's already occupying and running the facility, we noticed that they really went all out in terms of the recycling aspects. I mean, we walked in there the other day. I mean, they're recycling the cups, the lid of your coffee cup. They're recycling the coffee cup itself. You know, it's really, really split up into different elements, which we're extremely proud of.
And the packaging is all biodegradable that's used in the building.
Yeah. So, again, on the left, the 9 main risers for the fire water. I mean, those pipes are 200 diameters, rising up from the basement. And then on the right-hand side at street level, we actually then need to get them back into the driveway and out and up into the tower section. From another mechanical point of view, the 3 main kitchens in the building, we have ecology units as an extraction system that actually cleans the air from all the main cooking facilities and canopies and has clean air coming out. So on the left is public level 3. These are just typical service coordination layouts. So you can imagine if you didn't do it in color, you're pretty screwed. So you can't even actually work out where the core itself is sitting. But yeah, I mean, every pipe, every duct, every tray, cable tray has to have a certain level. You know, you can't exactly have a water pipe going through an air duct. Yeah, quite a lengthy task that was continuously happening in the background. On the right-hand side is a typical plant room level, those interstitial spaces, a lower level and an upper level. So we had to make use of the heights to get all the ductwork in, ductwork out. You know, it was quite a challenge. And then in between, we had to split in between all the shear walls that were connecting back to the core.
So access into the building is off of Maud Street through a triple volume colonnade. Pedestrians are prioritized with a very small portion of the vehicular entrance taking up a face of the building. So along the colonnade we have grids which take in fresh air and take that straight into the basements. Throughout the basements, we have sensors that detect the levels of carbon monoxide. As soon as the level gets too high, our extraction fans kick up in speed and pull air through the south of the building, through the building, and then out through the north of the building. Our parking areas in the podium are all naturally ventilated. And the parking in the podium takes up the northern portion of the tower, which is 6 floors, and we have an additional 4 floors of basement parking.
It's our favorite subject, our favorite service provider. I think, are we running on Jenny's at the moment? No, I'm just asking, are we running this facility on Jenny's at the moment with the load shedding? No, not yet. Not today. Okay.
Find out.
Okay. So back in 2012, our electrical consultants needed to apply with our clients for the capital connection cost of the building. So we've got an incoming line, a three-phase line of 4,000 kVA, which comes in at street level and distributes obviously into the MV rooms and the LV rooms. So at the time, that line cost 5 million rand that our clients paid Eskom. So Eskom had to very quickly upgrade their system so that by the time we occupied the building, they could give us 4,000 kVA of electricity. So we actually connected mid last year. We were running the construction on a temporary line. So throughout the tower, we've got over 260 intelligent meters from apartments to office space to public space. So you can log in, the guys can log into any meter. Even the lifts are monitored separately. So you can log into the lift, see how much power they're drawing on a day, a busy day, a quiet day. You know, it's a fully intelligent system. So, interestingly enough, the air conditioning uses about 2,000 kVA. So that's half of our supply, is just the air conditioning. So you can actually see how much we use. And currently, the building's only running on 400 kVA because we're not fully occupied. So it's ramping between 400 and 500 kVA at the moment. When the hotel comes into play, which is up on the higher levels, the hotel component will use about 1,000 kVA. So between the 3,000 of the hotel and the air conditioning, the rest of the building may use the other 1,000. So it's quite fascinating. If at the end of the day, when we're fully operational and we see we're only using, say, 3,500 kVA, we can actually get a rebate from Eskom and say, we're giving you back 500 kVA. So I don't know if any of you know, Eskom is currently charging about 20 Rand per kVA. So if we're on a 4,000 kVA line, our client is paying about 80,000 Rand a month just for electricity. So it's quite important to give some back. And Eskom are glad to take it back. Try and give to the rest of us. So quite fascinating, and some interesting facts about the cables and the lengths. And so instead of cables running up the tower, we actually have a bus bar that is distributing all the power through up into the tower. So there's our entrepreneur again, contemplating design. So the tower itself, on the north and the south, has an architectural feature running down the center, which actually in turn is a beautiful light strip that I think some of you have seen at night, and also has beautiful spine balconies that cantilever off the face of the facade. The rest of the building, basically every apartment or office or hotel room or penthouse suite has an accessible balcony with opening sections. So we can, when we are on load shedding or whatever, electricity dip, if the aircon is not working, you can still open your facade up. And on the corners of the building, we've got a flush glazed sections, also just an architectural feature. Even within the flush glazed sections, we've got opening sections, opening sliding doors. We call them the suicide balconies. Because you literally stand on the edge of there's a glass balustrade. So yeah, between the spine, the northern spine actually terminates under that Leonardo suite glass box. So that's another defying glass box that you can stand in.
Which cantilevers.
Which cantilevers off the face of the facade, yeah. So the northern one terminates underneath that box, and the southern one actually continues up into our spire, which houses our aircraft warning lights and the lightning protection. So there's some nice stats about the glazing and the balconies themselves. So many people have also asked the material that we used on the facade other than the glass. In 2015, Francois was looking for a cladding element that was lightweight, sustainable, and at a high performance and suitability, which fitted the criteria of our facade. Francois designed the building with the intention that it would last for 50 years without maintenance. There's obviously certain elements that will need maintenance, but the cladding was one of them. So with our facade engineers, we carefully designed the facade, and it's got a structural silicone bonding to an aluminium framing system that's then fixed onto the concrete frame. I don't know if you noticed that we never had external scaffolding on this building. The facade was erected from the inside out. Everything was dropped down, picked up by the crane, dropped onto platforms, brought in, and it was erected from the inside out.
That was also one of the reasons Decton was chosen, because it becomes more labor intensive, which is something that the client was very specific about. He didn't want things to be done in a factory where it's less labor intensive. Yeah.
So Cosentino, the company that makes the Decton and other products that we know, is based in Spain. So the panels were, I can't remember the exact size, but they were just over 3 meters by about 2.5 meters. So that's the size of the panel that was manufactured in Spain. So the logistics and a bit of a nightmare to get the stone, the actual Decton to come into South Africa was quite a feat. And what we did is we didn't cut it in Spain, we actually cut it here. So the panels were brought here, taken to a factory in Pretoria, and cut to size each size that we scheduled for each piece of Decton. Yeah, so Decton, the facade, it's an 8mm thick panel. It's made up of 12 raw materials, which is a secret to the formula, which we're not allowed to know. And obviously it's heated up, and so it's a very strong product. Using the lightweight system also then alleviated us not having to use a marble or a stone, like a granite, a much heavier system. So having a tower, how do you clean this thing? Quite a challenge. So with every balcony, you can access the sliding door and the glass balustrade on that balcony. But on the corners of the building and some flush glazing on the office levels, we've got rope access guys that can drop down and clean all those facades. There's at the top left there, we've got a rail, a rope access rail that runs on level 42 that the guys can come out on one of the service levels and then drop down. I was thinking of doing it with Mitchell, but I needed 10,000 hours before I could drop down on the facade like that. So yeah. Also, obviously, through maintenance, if anything needs maintenance, it will be done by rope access. So on the sloped glazing by our keyhole columns on the restaurant level, it's quite a sloped facade facing north. So to clean that and to shade that, we made use of aluminium walkways. And on the top right there, you can see the flush glazing of the office floors being cleaned. Whoops, wasn't supposed to do that. Okay, so can anybody maybe give me a guesstimation of how much concrete was used in the building?
In cubic meters.
In cubic meters. Next bid.
Anybody else?
90.
Okay. Does anybody want to take a guess how much steel was used in the building? It's in a value in kilograms. 8 million. Anybody else? Okay, so close, somewhere. It was close. So the concrete that we used in the building was close to 20,000 male African, and the steel that we used in the building, if you took all of it, was way our Eiffel Tower put together. So I think besides for what I learned from an architectural, a structural, and a service perspective on site, I think what really stood out for me was the construction process itself. We had to pump concrete up 200 meters, which meant that we defied gravity and then had to use a much more fluid concrete mix. Our core was built using the Perry hydraulic system, which meant that there was no breaks between constructing the core, and it always rose about 4 floors higher than the slab levels. We had 2 cranes on site. This was mostly due to the crane reach and the very small site that we had. But we had a very, very tight deadline in casting the slabs. So each floor needed to be cast. I think our program was 7 days. But in order to achieve this, it meant that both cranes had to be prioritized entirely for the structure alone. So if you think about that, that means that there's no time for the crane to load material into the building, nor to take waste out of the building. And on a site this big, there's a huge amount of that. So this ended up meaning that we worked, the site then changed to a 24-hour schedule where the night team would take all the waste out of the building, and it would bring all the materials onto site over that period. We couldn't do any heavyweight building because of the residential areas in our very close proximity. So we were limited with what work could actually be done overnight. I mean, I could go on about many more site-related stuff, but I think ultimately the construction of the building was really unique and so incredible to experience and witness.
So you might think that's quite a strange bit of information up there. So with Malika being on site, and the design process taking place literally throughout the construction phase, we very quickly realized, or actually we didn't realize, it just happened. We had to communicate between the office, on site, and sometimes off site. So we used a system called Smart Sheets. It's a platform where all the drawings, not just our drawings, structural, mechanical, electrical, landscaping, interior design drawings were loaded onto this platform. And then we had the app on our phone. And yes, we chewed data like you can't imagine. At any stage in the building or any drawing, we could actually call up onto our cell phones, as you can see on the left. We could highlight a particular area of concern. You could take a screenshot, send to somebody, phone them, what's going on here? I need a bit of assistance. So in the office, if they were working on detailing and a bit of coordination and working, they would take a photo of the screen. This is what I'm talking about. And phone us and say, this is what I need, or Malika, we need you to go take a photo of this certain area. We're not sure of the headouts, or
I ran like crazy.
that's why she's so small. So yeah, so you can. I mean, it's just amazing with the technology of today how we could actually communicate. The sketches at the bottom. I remember one near the end of one of the years. I went on holiday, but I took a set of drawings with me. Needed to do some work. Drew up and sketched up on the actual A3 drawings, took a photo, WhatsApped it to site or the office, and yeah, it's a constant form of communication that we used. It was amazing.
I think we always joke and say that the Leonardo was built off of a cell phone, but realistically, if you saw the amount of people standing around on their phones, looking at drawings, checking drawings, chatting to one another, it realistically actually just was that. But I think that the whole process of technology evolving allowed me to do my job in a way more efficient way. And it also allowed a constant flow of communication between myself, the contractor, as well as the site. So there was always information just being fed to the contractor.
So it looks like we're doing nothing. So in most of these, in all of these instances, the author of the photo or the photographer was trying to rat somebody out for either doing nothing or look what are you doing? You're playing on your phone. So,
but in every instance, we were actually genuinely working. Even the picture where Catherine's in the bar, she was on a phone call with one of the directors of our client Legacy.
I was testing out the bar.
She was testing out the bar. It was part of this process. So, being a mixed-use building, the building is comprised of retail facilities. It's got a massive conference facility. It has a restaurant, a gym, a spa, various bars, offices, apartments, a hotel, which is to come in the future store.
Yeah, it's just a shell at the moment. You can't, the building appears to be finished, but it's just the internal shell of the hotel component that will come.
It's got duplex penthouses, and as mentioned, it's got the Leonardo suite, the 3 floors right at the top, and the viewing deck. So with all the complex mixes of uses, we had to quite quickly and carefully design how you get people through the building vertically. So we rationalized it by separating our public access and our private access. The public lifts, which we call our shuttle lifts, are up at the top. They just run between the public parking areas and all the public facilities, and all our private lifts are within the core of the building, which is made up of the apartment lifts, the office lifts, the hotel lifts, and our firemen's and our goods lifts. So higher up in the building, the hotel lift actually doubles up in the same shaft of the office lifts, which run at the lower portion of the building. So there was a lot of moving around and trying to work out how each lift works. They're all also, the private lifts specifically are all secure within the lift, within the core. So you'd have to tag in. So it comes back to the technology that we used in the building throughout. Yeah, and I mean, another thing is when you drive into the building, one of the ideas was to have number plate recognition. So the guy who owns the Leonardo, or the girl, the lady, who owns the Leonardo suite right at the top, the people working in the building would be notified that they drive in, there'd be secure access for them, the lifts get shut down specifically for them to use.
It's important to buy that.
So we also have an escalator at our ground level, which connects the entrance of the building up to our reception area. And the idea was to really pull people through the space and to experience the space instead of just having all the reception area on the ground floor. Along the escalator, we have a massive piece of artwork, which we'll get into a bit more detail later. It tells the history of South Africa, and what's really beautiful about it is that you experience that as you go up and down the lift. So the escalators, you actually read that history.
So the image on the right is actually one of the lift shafts. So not only did we have to inspect every other front of house, back of house area, we even needed to inspect the lift shaft. So all safety was checked, and we actually climbed on top of the lift cars. They've got a setting that goes slower, and yes, we had to ride up and down and inspect the quality of the brickwork, the concrete, and
it was fun.
Yeah.
It was the fun snagging part of the building. Yeah.
Okay. Got 15 minutes, huh?
So throughout the construction process, we weren't actually allowed. We weren't allowed to take photos of the artwork because they wanted to reveal that right at the end of the opening of the building. But being a photographer, I was really interested in the color, the texture, and the light that were coming through all the materials. And I think each of them tell its own story. And the artwork does a really good thing by drawing people into the building, but it also allows people to explore the building in a much deeper level. So at the entrance of our building, we have what we call our chandelier, which is, in actual fact, a meteor. So it runs back to the theme of fire. Each piece is a tiny metal that's hand-stitched together that created this piece. It's quite a bold statement to make as you walk in. This again is the escalator art piece. So it's made up in panels, each panel telling a different part of the history of South Africa. And this theme relates back to fire. So the artist melted plastic together, which created the imagery that you see here. It's a huge, huge piece. I mean, this is only probably about like 1/10 of the entire piece altogether. My favorite, this featured staircase also links the entrance to the public facilities and the reception spaces up on level 3, and it's surrounded by a really beautiful art piece that is a sectional cut through the earth. It's made up of a fibrous plaster called Vertic art, which is brought in from France, and it allows you to sculpt layers of information. And this was really incredible to actually watch being done inside, because it started off as just a concrete shell. The artist came in, sketched out with basic lines and a pencil the curves that they wanted to follow, but to actually see them layer information was really incredible. And we happened to find photos before the staircase was ever installed of me in the space. So it kind of gives you a really good picture of how big that volume is and how big the staircase is.
So also as part of the art on level 1, on a black granite background, the artist took bones from various animals and put this image together, well, shaped together with the elephant skull at the bottom, which actually sits on the floor. And they carefully gold leafed some of the bones. So it's not just one animal, it's a few animals. And again, the bones dictates the earth concept. And up on level 3, we've got the sticks. I call them the sticks. Probably a bit rude. But on the left was the initial concepts design, where it was wood and sticks and a very natural toned piece of art. And on site, we sadly didn't think that we needed to seal the timber for fire reasons. So again, it was brought in on 6 panels, and then the artist actually carried on working to merge the 6 panels into one. So again, there's the keyhole columns and the wind. And then another on the conference level as well, Leonardo, she used a black cotton cloth, just a basic black cotton cloth, and she stitched the whole story of a planet being born with obviously a lot of thick wool and bright colors. She even used some sticks in her pieces of art, so it's well worth going to the building to actually see it. It's beautiful. It's so long that you actually can't photograph it. So one day, we we had the team on site, and we took some photos, and only then did we actually notice that out of the 11 of us, there were 9 females. So at any given point, thank you. So at any given point, I think at one stage, at the peak, we were maybe 13, but it was still probably a high 90% rate of females. So I'm very, very proud of that. Running the team under Francois, I am immensely proud of the girls. I call them my girls, sorry. The ladies in the team that are younger than me. They have grown an immense, I can't even actually describe how much growth they've gained, and the experience that we've all shared on sites. It's been one hell of a journey, and from start to finish, we're entering into our 8th year, and yeah, going strong.
So I think there's a strong message that goes out to the world that women aren't capable of being on sites, nor in my instance are they able to be amongst 3,000 men at any given stage. It was really difficult to be alone at times, but I think my experience, my growth, as Catherine said, and my knowledge that I've gained on sites has far outweighed any of this. I did start to see a shift in attitude from the managers on site, where they became a lot more aware of the challenges that women face, and that just goes to show that all it takes is one woman to change that preconceived idea and perception that we have in the industry. And if there's one thing that I hope to achieve, is that either a young architect or a future architect or anybody in the built environment realizes this and sees that you are capable of being a female in the industry and amongst 3,000 men or however many else there are. So these are just some really cool shots of the team whenever I connect visitors, my team visitors on site. My favorite being the top left picture where I had to get harnessed up. I was often in a harness, but this time I had to get into a harness, and I went down between our retaining walls and the existing gunite of the site to do inspections right at the bottom. So it's basically going all the way down the 4 basement levels, having to pull myself up.
Yeah, the space wasn't half the size of this table.
I mean, I just fitted, yeah.
That's why we employed her. She wasn't going to get stuck.
Yeah, to do inspections down at the bottom for our weak walls and everything else.
Some cool pics of the team throughout the process. The top right-hand one, you can actually see the crane baskets. We often went for a ride in the crane basket, which was also quite cool. Took photos of our team on site. And the right-hand bottom one, we were actually really working. We went looking down the eastern facade.
I swear we did work on site.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, it was an experience that I think as South Africans, we will perhaps never get the opportunity to repeat. So it was an amazing 7 to 8 years. And please go enjoy the building. Like we said, it is open, and yeah, go and enjoy a nice meal or a pizza or a coffee. So, does anybody have any questions?
Okay,
Should we sit down?
Get some mics up.
Yeah, let's.
You guys can take a seat.
Thank you.
All right, can we please give them a round of applause for that?
I don't run on site, so
Sure.
It most probably is going to take you just as long to answer this, but how do you work with the municipality with it?
So Legacy, the Legacy Group, obviously as developers, they've got their contacts. So we knew quite a few important guys within the council, but we still had to follow the same paths. We had to submit our SDPs. I think we submitted 3 SDPs throughout the process as the building got higher. Fortunately, we didn't have to physically go to sites and submit the plans. So we did have runners and guys, but each time it was a lengthy process. I mean, to push the council was a bit of a pain, but the good thing that we had on our side was the council and the country wanting to drive the tower, to have a new large facility like this. So they were told, we didn't get any special treatment, but they were told to make sure that this gets done properly and speedily. Yeah.
So. Next question. Got one at the back as well.
Well done, girls. I just wanted to ask, from a practice point of view, to have, 47 design iterations?
40, well, more or less.
Yeah, around about
How
40,
did
50.
the practice make any money?
Yeah. So with, like I said, our long-standing history with the Legacy Group, I mean, we knew how to work with them. Unfortunately and sadly in our industry, we do have to do a lot of risk work. But at a point, we said to them, listen, hey, now we need a bit of money. So we managed the process. We broke even, to be honest. We didn't really make much profit on the tower because of the intense time that we had to spend on it. And also the time the contractor was delayed. So we're slowly trying to get a bit of some additional fees from the clients. But yeah, the design process from 2012 till when we were on site in 2015, those 3 years, Francois was permanently on this project and dedicated to the design.
So did the client wear clawback in terms of abortive work?
No.
Not? Yo. Okay,
No.
Thank you.
I don't know what that means, but it sounds like it. All right, we've got another question. Can you go over here?
Thank you. My name is Scott Meyer from TUT.
Hi.
This project, I think it's one of the worst projects I've ever had in terms of design-wise. That is according to my knowledge as a student. Because I believe when you start to design a building, there's a relationship between also parking and the number of floors going up. So how did you balance that in terms of parking ratio to the continuous growing of the building, not knowing where it's going to end?
Yeah, so I think with a lot of the things, there was always a possibility that we were going to go much higher. We sort of had that idea from the beginning. So we did plan for that in our parking. So we had the 4 basements, and like I said, we had the 6 levels of podium parking above that. But there was a lot of back and forth in our council submission of trying to squeeze in parking wherever we could. But I think we had always the initial idea that we knew we were going to go higher and that we needed to cater for a certain amount of parking. So we're in excess of
Yeah, we are in
how
excess.
much parking
We only needed about 1,190 parking bays, and I think we've got an excess, I think it was about 100 bays that we have in excess. But interestingly enough, if I can just add to that, before the scheme really kicked off, why we only submitted the basements and the podium to council as the first phase without the tower, our client knew that there was a need for parking in Sandton. So even if we knew that the tower would fail and wouldn't be developed, we knew that we had a viable parking garage. I mean, it's actually quite sad, but that's what we literally looked at.
Which was the phase 1 of the project, which is what we first submitted to council. It didn't include the tower at all.
So.
And luckily your clients, they get chauffeured. They have to help train, hey?
Funny enough, we actually had an extra floor in the podium of a full plate of parking, which at one point our client decided to take out due to cost. And I mean, we were stressing big time that at the end of the day, would we actually have enough parking, knowing that this building is growing. So as Malika said, we at a point, tried to put in a few extra parking bays. Yeah.
Any more questions? Over there. Coming?
Yes.
Hi, Brian.
She's got a mic.
No.
Hello. Now, I also want to say congratulations. And what I like is the fact that I think the way that you explain it and tell it as a story and a narrative is what I think is the strength of it. And I just want to plead I'm teaching architectural students, so I would like them to see it not in a coffee table book, but in a TED talk. So please, just plead with the client to pay back and pay forward to people who can learn from the process. And I think it's inspirational, and students need to see and hear it more so than to just look at pictures. Yeah. But yes, I think it's an example of if you build it, they will come. I love what you've done. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
To add on to that,
there was a clap. Come on, yeah.
I think people see the building and have very strong ideas of what they feel and think about it. And I mean, everybody does for any building. But there's also a lot that we are not able to tell, which is what we tried. I mean, we couldn't even get half of what we wanted to in this presentation. But yeah, that adds on to what you said. I think it is a really important thing to share with students and even professionals.
Yeah, I did a quick school talk at the end of last year at UJ. I think Malika is trying to get into VITS. Yeah, so, I feel you. We need to teach the youngsters out there, in turn of the female thing and also what we're capable of doing.
And to get more site experience. I think that's such a big thing because, I mean, what I've learned it was 3 years permanently and 1 year additional to that, which I was on and off site. I mean, I think it would have taken me years and years and years to learn what I've learned in that short amount of time. And I mean, having breaks between your varsity breaks going to sites, I think it's such an important thing to do.
Yeah. Definitely.
All right, thank you. There's another question. Walele, are you up for the run? Okay,
yes, here we go. This actually links to what she was saying. I think it's incredibly impressive. Can you hear?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't see you.
I think it's incredibly impressive that the highest tower in Africa had a 90% female architectural team. I think that is amazing. And that's something that needs to be published internationally. Please send this stuff into Arc Daily and to international magazines. Make a big deal out of it because I think it shows that we can do it, Absolutely. I think so. Very well done.
Thank you. Beyond being a majority female team, our professional team was also all South African. And I mean, the Colton Centre was quite different to that. And many
international architect and local structural, But
I think that's also quite a unique thing. That's also a massive accomplishment that our clients managed to achieve. And like I said, the labour-intensive aspect of the building, employing 3,000 people at any given time on the project and 18,000 to 20,000 people through indirect employment is amazing.
And maybe why you guys didn't make so much money.
So just to touch again on the client issue, you mentioned that you had 350 design meetings through the course of this building, and that is quite a thing. How influential was the client in the eventuality of the design that emerged?
Wow. Thanks. Sure, how do we say that in like a few words?
Yeah, have we got another 2 hours? Or? Sorry. Sure. I think, like I said, the long-standing history that we have with Bart's and the Legacy Group we know that's how they work. And, you know, even though it can be so frustrating from a design point of view that they just don't like it or they'll change it, and specifically from a cost point of view, there was always a saving somewhere. We had to make a saving. You know, I like to use the example of a door closer. You can just imagine how many doors and how many door closers we've got. So to change the spec of a door closer, you are saving, you know, 1,000 Rand times however many door closers. So the viewing, the macro costing of the building was so important for them, obviously, to make the scheme viable at the end of the day. But design-wise, it's one hell of a... I mean, it's actually even depressing at some stages and very frustrating. I mean, you know, we spent hours in our boardroom, days, years.
Yeah, so I mean, if you take our meetings, they were all... I mean, meetings range anywhere, I don't want to say less than like 3 or 4 hours, because that's not
half
realistic.
a day.
It was half a day to a day, 350 meetings. That's a year worth of meetings.
Yeah. But yeah, like I say, very soul destroying at times. We would really, really moan a lot in the office and say, "This is what my client wants me to now do," you know, and very frustrating.
And at the end of the day, I mean, nobody on the outside knows that it's the client's intention. I mean, it's always going to come back to the architect. So
yeah, what were the architects thinking? But I think, you know, through the long journey, we are happy with what has ultimately stood out and what's standing there. We are proud of it, even though it took a lot of our soul. So yeah.
My question is sort of more urbanistically. So the tower, where the tower meets the street, in my opinion, is actually very urban and very pedestrian considered and city-like, city building, which isn't prevalent in Sandton. I think we can agree. So I was just curious what the motivation was and how you achieved that in a place like Sandton.
So that comes back, I think I sort of touched on it in the beginning of the presentation, with Francois Pinault being involved in the urban design of the area. So his intention was always to create a colonnaded walkway through Maud Street. The Nelson Mandela Square, as it is now, is not what he designed and intended for it to be. It's grown and added on, and it's become a bit of an everything sort of design. But the idea was for the public, like you said, to be prioritized along that street. And I think then it tied quite, because he had originally been involved in that, it became quite an easy thing for him to adapt into the design at the Leonardo at a street front. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
There's the site to the east of us, the Nedbank buildings, the lower complex. There's a bigger scheme with Nedbank to hopefully develop that entire site with the Leonardo. In the master plan, we've actually linked the two and hopefully build higher towers and then continue that colonnade along Maud Street. So that's the idea.
But the main thing being the colonnade and allowing bringing pedestrians into the space and allowing them into the building as well. Because I mean, I've in so many instances just see randoms walk into the building just because it is this like open frontage. And like I said, the vehicular access is such a small portion of the face of the street front of the building.
All right, we got a question here.
So I just wanted to congratulate you guys on getting people out of the construction industry to talk about architecture, which is really cool. And then I just had a question, as I'm a fellow female architect who hasn't spent nearly as much time on site. So I'm fully aware of all the challenges that one faces as a female architect, but I was just interested to hear how you found being a female architect, how you could use that to your advantage, and how you felt it benefited the building process.
Sure. Wow. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think it definitely was a process of trying to prove yourself in the beginning, especially being so young. It wasn't an easy process. to get the contractors on your side, but I think you have to, you really, improving yourself, I don't even know how to answer this question, it's so difficult. No, it's okay. I think that females do bring a different element to design, and I think that in getting on the side of the contractor, you bring that to them and they start to see things differently. So not only with the challenges, but also how to approach things and how to communicate with us. You kind of bring them back down to earth. I mean, I think there's many times where I was the person like breaking up like arguments and fights and that sort of thing. But yeah, it is quite a process.
And I think you've got to be extremely confident. You have to know what you're talking about. You have to be confident. I mean, even to the last day of Avengers time on site, many of the upper managements, even myself, they would walk past and would not greet you. So we've gone out of our way to actually say, oh, hi Gavin, how are you doing today? You know, and I think if you literally force yourself from a confidence point of view onto them, onto the management side and the management side of the subcontractors as well. You know, throughout the design process, I mean, the actual consultants, the professional team, we've got relationship with, that was fine. But the senior management across the board on site was the challenge. But, you know,
I think it was a lot easier for me though, because I was with them every single day and I was able to develop that relationship with them. And I think that in some instances it may be a bit harder when you're just on site like once a week or whatever. But I think, yeah, I gained that respect a lot faster. But yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah, but with my 20-odd years, I've learned very well how to position, not just physically, but to position myself on site and within a team of men. So,
and to position this conversation to an end, thank you so much, Catherine and Malika. Thank you so much, ladies.